All right, how many of y'all out there are listening and you have like this passion or this desire for something, and maybe it's like a passion project or something that you've just been passionate about for a long time, but you have no idea how you can turn that thing into a business or if it's even a business. So here at Kannon Studios, it started as a passion project and quickly evolved into a business once other people saw the passion and the purpose behind it. And so today I want to bring on a guest. It's actually one of my clients, someone that's on the Kannon Studios network, that's going to talk exactly about how he has turned a passion into a business that is thriving. He's creating partnerships within this specific industry. And so we're just going to dive deep into that today in this week's episode of the Kannon Studios Podcast. All right, this week I have a special guest. Y'all know I've been doing solo episodes since the beginning of the season, but now I want to start introducing guests. And I really just did this like at the last minute, to be honest with y'all. He was here recording, and I had an exercise that we were going to do at the end. I said, hey, you're used to interviewing people. Now I'm going to interview you. He agreed to it, but he didn't know we were going to record a podcast episode, and here we are. And so I've had the pleasure of knowing this gentleman for almost a year. And I almost didn't answer his call when he called about a year ago because it was from an out of town number.
It was.
And I was like, who is this random person calling me? But I'm so glad I did. And so now we've created a partnership here at the studio. If you know anything about any of my clients, you know that I'm always bragging on them. And when I mention the word golf or a golf podcast, y'all know exactly who I'm talking about. I'm talking about Victor Patterson, the host of the Tee to Green podcast, and I have him in here in the studio with me today. So welcome to the Kannon Studios podcast, Victor.
Thank you. Happy to be here. I'm glad you answered that call.
Yes, and so just when you think through, me and Victor were talking before this podcast episode, or before his podcast episode, he just finished recording, and we were talking about purpose. We were talking about things we're passionate about. We were talking about like how do you balance that while still trying to pursue other things. And so really like our stories are somewhat similar. Like I think everybody's story is connected in some way. They have a common thread. But when you think about the things that brought me and Victor together, it's things that we were passionate about. And so, as y'all know, here at Kannon Studios, we're passionate about people really leveraging their expertise and turning that into a content that they can share with other people through the form of a podcast. And so that's exactly what Victor did. Victor is all things golf. And so I had no idea what the sport of golf looked like and just how powerful it was until I started working with Victor. And now we've like traveled to these different golf tournaments. I have no idea what's going on, but it's just fun. And it's a challenge for me because I know nothing about it. And so I wanted to bring Victor on to really talk about, like, share some of his story, but then also talk about how he was able to pursue like something that he was passionate about. And now he has a full business where he's offering the podcast. So Victor, for those that don't know or maybe haven't heard your story, like how did you even get into the game of golf?
Yeah, thank you. And it's good to be here and honored and really privileged to be doing this or walking this journey with you, Gianni. How did I get into golf? For a very long time, I grew up playing basketball, and basketball allowed me to play in college. I had an offer to play professionally, and as that time, I didn't buy into the offer, but I still played competitively in some pro-am leagues in my hometown. As the time with basketball was winding down, and life wins when you're an athlete. I still had that competitive drive. Mm-hmm. I was early in my career as a professional, post-undergrad, and my boss and my boss's boss, one was a University of Illinois fan, the other was a University of Nebraska fan. they both bragged about their universities from a basketball perspective. So we had that banter.
Right.
Me being a University of Kentucky fan. And so that just led to them realizing that, one, our days are done, but your day is coming, and let's take this to the golf course.
Yeah.
And so they introduced me to everything golf.
Okay. So, were you still talking?
No, go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah. I'll wait for the next question.
Right. So you mentioned like the competitiveness, right? So I played basketball growing up too. That's probably the sport that I played the longest. And I consider myself pretty competitive. Like if I start out on something, it's a good and a bad thing because I want to be the best at it, but sometimes that's to your detriment, right? Now I see where Kannon gets it from, but you mentioned competitiveness and how that drove you. Like, how has that driven you to just in life, right? Whether that's through something personal or you pursuing the podcast. Like, how has being competitive worked to your advantage?
Yeah, it's for anybody, including yourself, that has played a sport long enough beyond just the introduction years, particularly in the U.S., the way that the sporting environment works is they kind of throw you a bone, and the bone is heightening your competitive spirit.
Right.
And so for me, achieving the level that I did, it's hard to turn that off in life. And now I'm a corporate professional, and you just can't turn it off in life. And so I think the passion for achievement and the passion for competing oftentimes against yourself and maybe something superficial just continue to fuel me. And like you said, I don't know if my competitive spirit is healthy for me today because I see it in my daughter too.
Yeah.
But it is good in that it never allows you to rest on your laurels. And so you just keep going, chasing excellence, knowing that the bar is going to move at some point, but your competitive drive, or my competitive drive, keeps me moving towards whatever I think that bar is. And golf has been part of that.
On the flip side of using your competitiveness to your advantage, what are some ways in which you being competitive has caused you to like talk yourself out of something or be too hard on yourself about something?
I think there have been particularly different points in my career where I have, for really reasons that may not have been valid, decided to sit still when I wanted to move forward. And I think, as we talk about where I am today, with the podcast in particular, this has been an example for me where I've kind of jumped over the broom, if you will, and kind of fought off that demon. What's interesting about being a professional is that in many ways it's very different than being an athlete. Being an athlete, you just kind of feel you don't feel like there are any obstacles. The only real obstacle in the moment is the fact that you lost, but you know that there's going to be a competition of some sort. Being a professional, it's a much wider space, and competitive athletes really have to tone down themselves in some ways. And so I think if to answer that question, I would say that there have been times in my professional career where my competitive athlete drive has said, you're ready, go for it. But something in that corporate space has, I've caved to it, if you will, and not followed what I instinctively wanted to do.
Would you say that sometimes your competitiveness has caused you to like overthink?
Oh, absolutely.
It's interesting. So the last podcast episode was I don't remember the title of it, but the theme of it was overthinking, right? And so just like through that, kind of just at a high level, like some of the things I talked about was overthinking, like causes you to procrastinate. So it leads to inaction. And then I think for me, what really hit home was y'all know I talk about God on all these episodes, but I think sometimes overthinking is our arrogance telling us that we have it all figured out. And so it's like we want to know what that next step is, or like, hey, we have all these things. Like the example I used was a car, right? And so that was like the basic thing I could think of analogy, right? When we go to buy a car, we buy it because of features, price, whatever. But we're not asking like who put these pieces together. Like, was it who put this steering wheel on here? Who put the wheels on here? I don't know all the parts of the car. Like, who put the frame together? Who painted it? Like, we're not asking all that, right? We just know we like what we see. It fits within our price, and we like the features, right? And we trust and have faith that that car is going to take us from where we need to go, right? But we're not worried about all the parts and all the intricate details. And I think sometimes that's what overthinking is, okay, who painted the car? Like, okay, maybe I need to drive to this place. Like, are the is the frame going to be able to sustain me going from home to where it like, and so I think sometimes overthinking leads us to inaction, which if you're competitive and if you're an athlete, you have to do both of those things, especially if you play basketball, especially if you're a point guard, which I never was a guard. But if you are a guard, you have to read that entire floor. And it's not just about you making the ball go from the other side of the court to eventually scoring. You have to read and understand everything on that court, right? But at the same time, trust in those teammates and trust in the plan and trust in the play. It's the same thing like I was talking about with that car. And so eventually we have to take that step, because if we don't take a step or we don't make a move, like as a point guard, you can't just stand there and dribble. You gotta make a move and trust that God is gonna allow you to score, trust in your teammate or whatever the case may be. So it's the same. I overthink a lot. Like a lot, and that's a mix of my parents. My mom is a do before thinker, and then I'll worry about the rest later. And my dad is a let me think of plan A, B, C, D, E, F, and then we'll act. And so, it does lead to, I think competitiveness does lead to overthinking, which can cause inaction. And my TED Talk is over.
It's such a good point. I was a point guard, and one of the strengths that I possess as a point guard was my ability to analyze. I was very cerebral as much as I was talented. And so I could predict what the defense was going to do, help my teammates understand that, and then inevitably we could get anywhere from, let's say, 6 to 12 points just off of really small things that few people pick up on. Now, and what's interesting about that is there's a need in life to be mindful. Right? Think about what you're doing at least once before you do it.
Right.
But what happens, I think, more in the corporate space, and I can only speak for myself, is you lose that point guard edge and mentality. It's almost like you've given up or at least compromised everything that made you successful because of this space over here. And for me, the challenge has always been, my inner voice has always been talking. It's time. It's time. It's time. And again, listen, life life has a big part of the decisions that we made. And you know that, I went through a divorce. And so that had an impact on a number of years and the decisions that I made in my life. But there's still space to be that point guard, to be kind of that uninhibited individual who's built up enough talent and skill
Yeah.
to move in whatever
Yeah.
direction life is suggesting is your opportunity.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so we've been talking about basketball, right? Like how I want to talk about golf, like
Yeah.
pivot and talk about golf.
Yeah.
So are there any like transferable skills that you've learned through the game of basketball that have like helped you when you're playing golf?
Yeah. So again, I go back to it's a really good question. And I think they span the range. I think first and foremost, as a point guard, your success is largely built on your ability to communicate and build relationships with people. And so, golf, that is really foundational to playing golf, but it is also a byproduct of playing golf and how you can be successful. I think the other thing, and I just talked about it a minute ago, is just being analytical. Golf, no two holes are ever the same.
Yeah.
No two courses are ever the same. And so how you approach, really, in both sports, how you approach getting the ball in the hole is strategy, it's execution. There's being mindful of pace because you can't be on a course all day. I think those are probably some of the things that come to mind.
Yeah.
Right off the top of my head, both are very competitive. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I have to say, with the little knowledge of golf that I have, I think golf is one of the only sports I've seen successful athletes not have to be in physical shape. Why is that?
So it's a really good question, and I think today you're seeing athletes that you're seeing golfers who want to create bodies similar to a baseball player,
Right.
a football player to a lesser degree, but maybe a golfer.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, golf is largely about your ability to torque your upper half. And so, whether it's the LPGA or the senior PGA, you will see golfers who are swinging a club and it doesn't look like they're exuding a whole lot of force and a whole lot of speed. But at the end of the day, when you look at how hard or how far they're hitting the ball, particularly off the tee, it's in excess of 280 yards. And so that's less to do with your physical nature, and it's more to do with how agile your body is and how you're able to just rotate and swing and let your body naturally do what it's supposed to do. Now, those golfers that you see today who are physically different than golfers of 30 years ago, they're creating speed. And in the sport of golf, speed equates to more distance. So now you've got somebody that's hitting a golf ball 280, but they're now hitting it 330. And so that changes how they attack a hole or how they play the game.
It's just that upper that upper body. Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense. I've just always wondered that, like, golf is one of those, for the few times that I have watched it, right, I'm like, dang, like, how does that guy's stomach not get in the way of him being...
So, listen, and we all have done that. What's interesting about this sport is you could probably make a case that they are more flexible and agile than most other athletes except gymnasts. Because they have to, you have to stretch from toe to shoulder when you're playing golf. And the only sport that I can think of that really does that and needs to do it is gymnast.
Interesting. Okay. I don't know. I'm just due to this podcast or your podcast and just the introduction of golf, like, I'm interested in it because it's something different and I love a challenge. And so I'm pursuing like learning how to play. But I just know when I go to Top Golf, I am god awful. Like, and I think it might be because I used to play softball, and
Absolutely.
so I try to hit it like a baseball. It goes far,
Yeah.
but it's like, did I just tear something when
See, that's where that stretching comes. You gotta stretch. But I'll say that you're more apt to being good in golf because you've mastered they call it the arc. You've mastered the arc of the swing. Swinging baseball bat, because I play baseball too. Swinging a baseball bat is different than a golf club, but any teaching pro could help you understand the difference and could still allow you to that range.
We'll see.
Yeah, no, you're gonna be good. You're gonna be good. You're gonna be all right.
We will see when that starts. I mean, truly, the reason why I want to learn how to play golf is really like for a selfish reason.
Yeah.
Because I went to a couple of golf tournaments, just like really networking ones, not like
Yeah.
professional golf tournaments. And I always assume like, okay, these guys are signing up. They must be really good.
Yeah.
And I watched. I'm like, these guys look like me in Top Golf. So I was like, what I want to do is get a group of ladies. I want us to all become like decent at golf. And go to these golf tournaments and whoop some ass.
Yeah.
Like, that is the whole reason why I want to do it.
And listen, it's gonna happen. And because of that, I'm gonna continue practicing because I know you coming.
Oh man. So I can't wait for that to start, because anything I start, like, I always want to figure out like how can I become good at it, and
Right.
so I'm excited about that. So when we think through like, why are you so passionate about golf? Like, what is it about golf? Like, from the outside looking in, it's like it's just another sport. But like, what does golf mean to you? What does golf mean to Victor?
It's a really good question. It's become a part of my life in the way that basketball was early on. And so it's become multifaceted in that it allows me to still be an athlete. It keeps my critical / strategic thinking really, really sharp because I am an analytical person. It allows me to compete, which is tied to the athlete. And you talked about it moments ago, where you find challenge in wanting to get better. I still have room that I want to get better. And as an athlete, even in basketball, for as much as I play the sport, I study the sport as part of getting better and playing it. And so golf has given me that opportunity to study it, learn it, and then apply it. And, we were talking earlier about life as a journey, and it really is being a continuous learner, and the bar is going to be raised. And so you just keep kind of chasing the bar, if you will, until the good Lord closes your eyes.
Yeah.
And so that's what's led me to the sport, and I think more specifically to our relationship, it's what's led me to being a podcaster and a voice in golf.
Yeah. So just thinking through that, right? Like, if we think back to the beginning of when we started working together, like, first of all, what made you like, I understand you're passionate about it. You had started your podcast prior to us working together. But what is it about this thing that you're passionate about caused you to go out and to like seek who could help you get or take your podcast to the next level?
So I have two really good friends, and for whatever God only knows reason, I would talk, and neither of these individuals plays the sport, and I probably could safely say that one of the two is as close to hating the sport as you could. So why I was talking to him about this, I have absolutely no idea. Like I said, God only knows.
Yeah.
But at different points, they ended up saying, listen, essentially I'm done. You can't talk to me about this because I don't have an interest. And really my conversation with them was debriefing the final round of a tournament that I had just watched, right? And just kind of unloading.
Yeah.
And they ended up saying, dude, you just need to start a podcast. And so that was the seed that we're nurturing right now.
Yeah. That's interesting.
But I was passionate about it too. It was almost like me having a podcast and not knowing that I was capable of doing what we're doing today.
Yeah.
And so they just finally said, hey, I'm done. You go do this.
Yeah.
And that led me to calling you.
So when you think about like where the podcast started to where it is now, right? Like just reflecting back on that, like what has that like journey really looked like and meant to you in terms of something that you're so passionate about?
It's meant a lot, and I know that's kind of an ambiguous word, but there's so much definition under that it would probably have to be another podcast itself. The journey has been one, and I talked about it earlier, where as a point guard, I honestly believed and played that there was nothing that I couldn't do, and there was nobody that could stop me from doing what I wanted to do. This podcast has not only brought that back to the forefront, but it's also kind of given me confidence in other areas of life where it may have been tweaked in a way. I think that there's a level of humility that I think has always been with me. And when I approach new ventures, finding someone who is more accomplished and seasoned in that space, and then letting them teach me and then come along the journey.
Yeah.
And I think the other piece is I get to tell what we're doing here is we're talking about, we're curating stories about golf that are lesser known stories. And we're also going to be on the front end of more recognized stories. And so I get to do everything that I was doing with a few people, but I'm doing a whole lot more and giving joy to a number of people that I haven't even, I haven't physically met.
Yeah. Yeah. Through the power of like a podcast, honestly.
Right. And we've met some people, right?
Yeah.
We've traveled. I mean, so
Yeah. So it's been pretty interesting, like the journey and seeing like, I know how to produce a podcast. I don't know anything about golf, but I think that's the fun in the journey, right? Is like going into those spaces that aren't super familiar. And I think that's the only way that you grow is like, now I'm interested in playing golf. Like, I don't think I'll ever be a professional, nor do I like aspire to be one, but I at least want to not look like a fool when I go to a golf tournament, right? But that started because like I probably would have never been interested in golf prior to this podcast. So when you just think through like the journey, and then when you first when you first called me and said you had a golf podcast, I'm like, golf pod? Like, I don't know anything about, like, how am I going to help this man, like, produce? I'm like, all I know how to do is produce podcasts. I have no idea what that looks like for the golf space. So for me, it's been like a lot of studying and then just really the foundational pieces of it because, golf is like the cover of the podcast and what the podcast is about, but it's really the story, just like getting people to come back and listen. And like you just interviewed the golf coach from Virginia Commonwealth, and he talked about how he was like that golf team was ranked like number 187, and now they're number 38. So being able to hear, I don't care who you are, if you're interested in golf or not, I want to know, how did a coach how did he take a team?
Yep.
I don't know how many golf teams there are, but number 187 is not a high number,
right,
to number 38. Like, I want to hear that story, and so that's something that you've been able to highlight, and I'm looking forward to like future episodes when we talk about that. So when we think through how can you turn something that you're passionate about into a business like Victor has done, it's really like the who, not the how, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So have you read that book by chance? Who, Not How?
No.
Yeah. That's
all right. So one. Okay. Add it to the library. Add it to the library.
It's a good one, because I think when we think through goals, and you are a living testament of the who, not the how, right?
Okay.
I think there's a good balance of both, but I think the who needs to always trump the how, right?
Yep.
Because when we have a new idea, me and you both being analytical, we often try to figure out the how, but it's not the how, it's the who's going to get us to that goal.
Yep.
So even in golf, these professional golfers, they know when they go out there, they know how to hit at a certain spot because of the who that's pouring into them. So, yeah, that's a good book.
Okay.
Good book to read. So just like in closing, this episode is longer than my usual episodes, I think, but that's because I got a guest on here. Y'all know I don't talk this much usually. But just in closing, if there's anybody that's listening that maybe there's something that they're passionate about and they're not sure, maybe they're not sure where to start, or if it's even something worth starting, like what is something that you would tell someone, like if God has placed something in their heart or something that they're super passionate about, what are your words of inspiration for them to pursue that thing?
Yeah, that is a awesome question to close. I would say allow yourself to listen to that internal voice, because that is truly God telling you what your destiny or your purpose, your talent is going to be best manifested. But to answer your question, it is to allow someone within your network to direct you to someone who is the expert or who can be the who to help you move down this path. And
Yeah.
I think that has been, I mean, you're that person for me.
Yeah.
And when we think about the past year, we could sit down and talk to anybody about what day one is like and what we're here, and we almost know what the rest of 2024 is going to look like if we execute. And so that would be what I'd leave them to. Do not deny that inner voice, because that is God.
Yeah.
And then 2, find someone that you can share whatever is burning inside of you and allow them to direct you to someone that can begin to nurture that seed.
All right. I like it. I appreciate that. I think that is definitely going to help somebody that's listening. Here's my last and final question, because I already have an answer for this, but I'm curious to know your answer. If you could have any guest on your podcast, it could be golf or not golf related, don't matter. Who would it be? I put you on the spot. I know who mine would be.
I would.
I hope our answer isn't the same.
I would probably say God.
Okay. God. I mean, I think he's everywhere.
Yeah. I would love to have that person. I'd love to have him just to talk about this journey that is life.
Yeah.
But if you're asking me, is it, again, related to my podcast, I think maybe one person could be my mom. The other person, I don't know, golfer. I don't. Yeah.
Yeah. No golfer in particular?
So I would. Well, if I think about the work that we're doing, I probably would invite Tiger, and that would be a really interesting conversation with him, because I do think that there's, and maybe he gets to the point where he writes a memoir. Mm-hmm. He has carved the knife into the sport that was and the sport that is and will be, and the way that he's done it and the trials and tribulations that he's gone through, I would just want to understand authentically what has that journey been like for you.
I like that. Tiger Woods will be a fun one, I think. And now he's like coaching his son, which is a really cool thing to see.
Yep.
So I do know a little bit about golf.
Don't
ask me anything else past that. So if I had to think of a guest for your show that I would love for you to interview, he's not the best golfer. He's not even a professional golfer, but it would be Steve Harvey. I say that every time,
Right.
like selfishly because I want to meet him. I feel like he's already my uncle in my head.
Yeah.
But then too, like that would be someone that if my granny were still here, she would be so excited for that. Like, so, and my parents, like, but I think that will happen. I don't know when.
I was just going to say, we're putting it out there.
I think it's closer than we think.
Yeah, we're putting it in the universe.
But I think that would be a really good one. Like, yeah, to have Steve Harvey on the show, because he has golf tournaments. I don't know how good of a golfer he is, but
he plays a lot.
He does,
yeah.
And so, so that's who I would love to be on your show.
So we're putting it out there in the universe.
Yeah,
the good Lord is gonna cross paths with us.
Yeah,
Steve, we can get you to Kannon Studios. Let's do it. Let's do it.
We'll even come to him.
Right. Bring our mobile feed.
Yes. Well, absolutely. This has been fun.
Great.
I think you're the first client I've ever had on the podcast. So this is interesting, just like for you to be interviewed, for me to interview you. Usually I'm on the other side,
correct,
like watching you interview someone. So, so this has been fun.
Yeah, it's been good.
Where can people find you? I know I'll tag it below, but for those that are listening, where can people find you to learn more about the show?
Yeah, so right now, and again, we're building. The principal spot is Instagram. We have a Instagram site, and it is T_2_podcast. Or you could just type in the search Victor Patterson and our thumbnail will come up. Mm-hmm. Definitely please follow. We're doing some phenomenal things. We're growing, which is always a good sight. Mm-hmm. I think that's it, right?
Yep.
Yeah, that's where we're at.
Yep, that's where we're at. That's not the right Instagram, but I'll take it below. I was like,
I'm behind the microphone. That's why I said, go to the search bar and type in Victor Patterson.
I was like, T. And we will put it in the show notes.
Right.
Where you can find the podcast, following the podcast on social, all that fun stuff. We can't wait for y'all to listen. It's actually pretty interesting, even if you're not into golf.
Yeah.
Just listening to the stories of the different people that Victor interviews is good. Anywho.
Yeah.
Thank you for tuning in to the Kannon Studios Podcast. If you got this far, go ahead and share this episode with 5 people. Like, there's at least 5 people that need to hear this, that are passionate about something and aren't sure if it's something they should pursue, if something they can turn into a business. Let this episode really give them confirmation if that's something they need to pursue. So share it with 5 people. And as always, thank you for listening to the Kannon Studios Podcast. This is Gianni, your host. And as always, keep creating. Bam, that's it.
Wow, that was good.